Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Welcome, and thank you for coming to a session entitled What You Can Do to Recruit and Retain Undergraduate Women for Your Computing Programs. And it was meant to be a title that was action, and it was meant to provide you with some information that hopefully you can take home and do something with and encourage your colleagues to do something with. And so I feel very fortunate today to have a panel of really well-respected folks in the field of computing education and in the area of retaining women in computing. So we are going to go just in alphabetical order, and I will let each person introduce him or herself as they get up to speak so we don't waste any more time. But please feel free to keep eating, and we'll have the Q&A after everybody speaks, so you will have plenty of time to finish eating, and hopefully we'll have a very lively discussion at the end. So we're going to start with Maureen. Do you want to start? Okay. So.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Maureen Biggers. And the way that we've set up the panel for this period is we're going to talk a little bit about some case studies from each of our institutions. And then what we want to do is open up for the remaining half of it for discussion, questions, and also we know that there's some people in this room who are also making a difference in this area, and we'd like to invite you to share what you're doing with us. So that's me. I'm actually here wearing two hats today. The first one, I'll talk a little bit about some resources from the National Center for Women in Information Technology. I wear a hat there as a co-chair of the Academic Alliance. And then I'm also the Assistant Dean for Diversity and Education in the School of Informatics at Indiana University. Okay, so first a word about NCWIT, and this is a little commercial for NCWIT. We are very engaged in growing the number of women in computing and the needle of women in computing. And we brought lots of resources if you're interested in the back of the room. One of the things is a handout that I think each one of you has right here. Top 10 ways you can retain students in computing. Very first thing to mention about NCWIT is that everything that they produce for you as resources, and there are a ton of resources for the Academic Alliance members, it's research-based. So they have a great group of social science researchers who have tested these strategies. We know that if you use them, they work well for all students, and they work particularly well for women and underserved students. So if you pay attention to the things and try to do what's in this little top 10 thing, everything on here might seem simple. There's a lot of research that's behind it that will make a difference in your classrooms as you manage them. A few other things I wanted to mention that are available to you as resources. There's a new, well, it's not actually new, but student experience of the major survey that is available to you to download and administer to all students in your department. Get some invaluable feedback about how students are perceiving the climate and maybe where you can direct some energies if you want to make some changes in your department on behalf of women. If you don't currently belong to the Academic Alliance, I invite you to please join. It's very simple. All you do is get a letter from the chair of the department saying we'd like to belong. There are no fees involved. There needs to be a point person. And then you have the opportunity to join a wonderful network of people who are engaged in this area. Another initiative that is going really, really gung-ho is they have an Aspirations Award for high school girls in computing. They have the central office offers a national award, but what has begun to take place, if you'll go to the website, you'll see that a lot of us are now offering regional awards. So for example, we do one now for the state of Indiana, and we collaborate with other Indiana universities, and corporate partners, and high school teachers, and so forth. Some places just do it in a city, so you could just do it for your school. But it's a great way to do an outreach and grow awareness about computing among women and teachers and so forth. Okay, so Also online, they have, as I mentioned, tons and tons of resources. In the back, we have a few that we brought that specifically have to do with retaining women. There's how to use pair programming. They also have what's called in-the-box resources. So from A to Z, you can download from the website the very beginning steps of how, if you want to use pair programming, here's how to do it if you really wanted to make a difference and you follow these rules. And here are ways that you can assess whether or not it makes a difference. So from A to Z, everything is in there. Outreach in a box. We have a brand new one that the Academic Alliance just helped put together. It's called an REU in a box. So it's really great for all students, but again, if you pay attention to how the women are, the experience of the women as they go through research experiences, it's really an excellent resource. So also in the back we have what research-based methods retain women. We've got recruiting women through inclusive pedagogy. We've got all kinds of different things. How to avoid stereotype threat. Anne's going to mention a couple other ones that are in her talk that she's using and that work really well, and I've also used them with great success at Georgia Tech. Collaborative learning, and so forth. So they're really excellent, but the two I want to point out in particular are in the back. They're booklets. And again, you can download them, but we brought you the snazzy booklets today. One's called Strategic Planning for Recruiting Women into Undergraduate Computing, and the other one is Strategic Planning for Retaining Women. And I'm a big proponent of you have to have a plan. You know, everybody can do this little drop in the bucket here. You can do collaborative learning in one section of one class in your department for one semester, and it will make a little bit of a difference. But if you have a comprehensive plan, that's going to make a bigger difference, a big difference. And you can't see it, and I was going to pull up a connection on the internet, but I didn't do that. So I just want to point out this little wheel here, this little cog. It's on a resource in the back, and it's the basis for what my story is about Indiana University. What I know about undergraduate student retention aligns perfectly with this model. This is the model NCWIT puts out, also specific to retaining women and minority students and all students really in computing. And basically, it's a wheel, and all of the pieces, you have to have something going on in all of the pieces. Yeah, and I'll just let you know, one of them is pedagogy, one is a recruiting strategic plan, one has to do with curriculum, student support, evaluation, institutional policies and support. And if you just have something happening in one, if you really want to move the needle, it's not likely to happen in as a significant a way as we want it to happen. So that's my introduction to the intervention that we have. Okay. Whoops. Okay, so what I thought I would do is start with what our results have been so far. So what we did was we set a very clear goal. And what we decided was we started with 75 undergraduate women in our program, and we decided in 2 years we were going to double that number. And then we were going to make that hopefully everybody's mission. Everybody would buy in. Now, not everybody did, but we started here. And if you think about systemic change or institutional change, and there's a man named Cotter who has a lot of a theoretical model about that, and the very first thing is that you have to create a sense of urgency if you want change really to start happening. So we did that. We said, okay, we have joined the Pacesetter group. We have committed to doubling the number of women, and we're going to do it by such and such a date, and we need everybody here to help us. And so we did that. So what we ended up doing was we have doubled the number of women majors. We did it in 18 months instead of 2 years. Last fall, we doubled the number of women in the intro course. At this point, we are on track to once again double the number of women in the intro course. And a couple of things I'll show you will hopefully let you see how. So we took that little cogged wheel over there that's in that far corner, and we sort of turned it into our own little version, our own little flower. But as you can see, we're working in lots of different areas. And the very first place we started was with evaluation and assessment. So we did the student experience of the major survey, but another one that we've done that's very successful, it's really easy, it's a resource for you too. We created a day one survey, administer it to all of our students in their classes on their first day, and it helps us understand why they're there. Who are the influencers? What's their motivation? What's their background experience? What do they want out of our course? So that's where we started. And then we ended up looking at image and recruiting, very important. If you think of computer science, we're also informatics. Both of those we know image-wise for women, it creates something that sounds very inorganic, something that is very, they want to understand how they can make a difference, how they can help people, how they can connect, how they can be part of a team. And the image it's conjured up is asocial geek, in a cubicle, so forth. And so how are we going to work on that image? So we did one thing I'll show you. This is the one thing, and the data that we have, this seems simple. This is what has led to doubling the enrollment in the intro course. We met with our students. We used the day one survey results. We said, why are you here? Why do you like what you're doing? Why are you a major? We put it all into this. We pulled it together with career stuff. And we know that we learned from our day one survey that the top 4 influencers are peers, the university division advisors, because our first year students are all undecided or pre-majors, parents, a big one for the women are the parents, and then our website, or a website. So we sent this brochure home to all of the women who had been admitted to the university and were in the pre-major program, which is almost all of them, to the family of Jane Prey, in hopes that it would strike up a conversation. Okay, we doubled the number of women in the intro course, and the day one survey last fall, huge significant jump in women who said that an influencer was parents. So something's happening. And then, of course, it's up to us to keep them. But at least it's a start. And then, in fact, what we're doing is increasing retention to the next level. So the next area is student support. Day one survey, we found out that while the majority of students say it's important for them to feel a sense of belonging in their major, it's higher for women. And so we started creating a bunch of special interest groups, including an undergraduate women's group for them. Curriculum, we redid the first course. Well, another thing we found out, and the research shows this too, from the student experience of the major surveys, there's a direct relationship between retention and context of assignments in the courses. So if they understand the relevancy of what they're doing. It wasn't true for men. You could give them anything to do at all, and they would just do it and stay. But the women wanted to understand, why is this important? How does this relate to the big picture? Give me context, make it matter. So we're working with that in our curriculum. And then we've been using, we formed a division of undergraduate education, and every 2 weeks, the people who teach the undergraduates meet in a collegium to discuss best practices that are promoted by NCWIT for use in the classroom. And that's 3 years now going, and right now we started it saying you will come, and now they say we will come, and we're going to lead it, and they've really taken off on it, so off with it. So I think that's about it. So the other thing I'll show you is we do have resources. If you go to our university school site, you can get to community diversity, and then there's a thing that says repository, and you can see our day one survey, the brochure, and several other things there that may be of use to you. And now I'll turn it over to Anne. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Ann Gates, and I'm from the University of Texas at El Paso, and I'm also representing the Computing Alliance of Hispanics. That is an NSF-funded project through the Broadening Participation in Computing program. Latinos represent the largest and fastest growing population group in the United States, and 1 in 4 newborns are Hispanic. Yet the number of students that are represented in higher education is very low. Only 18.6% of Latinos between the ages of 25 and 64 have at least a 2-year degree program. So we have been very focused on creating an alliance that's a consortium of 10 Hispanic serving institutions in the country. And our focus is in promoting Hispanics and also looking at Latinas as well. And so I am, let's see. So this is showing the initiatives that we have. I'm not going to talk about them in any great depth because there's not enough time. But what Maureen said holds very true to how we created our alliance. We're very focused on recruitment, retention, and advancement of students, providing support structures, and also looking at policy. So I'm going to concentrate on peer-led team learning. That is one of the initiatives that has shown a lot of impact, especially with women. So what you see in the first square is really looking at the retention issues. So we have student advocates on each of the campuses that is focused on looking for opportunities for students to go for scholarships or go to conferences, and so they work with the students to motivate them. And the middle block is what we're doing to move students into graduate studies. So the Affinity Research Group model, which I'll be talking about in more detail in the next slide, is focused on providing research experiences for students. FemProp is a program that's being piloted at 2 of the institutions that's focused on recruiting Latina women at the junior level, working with them through research using the Affinity Research Group model, and then making sure that they attend conferences and workshops that prepare them to go on to the PhD program. Fellonet and PaperNet is focused on providing constructive critique to students so that they can put together competitive scholarships and fellowships. And then we have development workshops and faculty advocates, because we know that we have to work with the faculty as well. So the peer-led team learning is really about giving leadership roles for undergraduate students so that the undergraduate students are working with students in the gatekeeper courses. So we focus on CS1, CS2, and CS3. And so those students provide a collaborative learning environment where you're giving students problem solving, giving them problems to solve related to the coursework that is going on. So they meet once a week. They meet in groups of 4 to 6, and then they work on solving problems. And what we have seen, what we have seen here is that the PLTL students are more likely to complete the gatekeeper courses. We saw a 13% increase in the female student completion rates of these courses. There was a 10% increase overall. I neglected to say that PLTL came from the CUNY system. It started out in chemistry, and so we're adopting it in computer science. And then there was a 6% in Hispanic student completion. PLTL students have access to role models and support in those courses, and then the leaders we found really gain the teaching, communication, and leadership skills that help them become successful. The Affinity Research Group model is about involving undergraduates in research, and we know from the national data, SRI international evaluation shows that students that are exposed to undergraduate research are twice as likely to go on into graduate study. This model is a non-hierarchical model. It is based on cooperative team interaction, so we really focus on the 5 elements of a cooperative team: building positive interdependence, promotive interaction, ensuring individual accountability, teaching skills, and then processing over what's working, what's not working, and how you can improve. And that's both the students and the faculty mentors. But what's really important is that second bullet, which is saying that there's a deliberate and intentional development and practice of skills. So we recruit students who may not normally be involved in research. So students that show the potential to succeed in research, but may not have that confidence. And so that's how we're changing numbers, is through that recruitment. And so we are creating a student culture. There's faculty and student interaction, which is highly important for retention and advancement. We're creating mentors, role models, and helping the students set clear goals. So this work is based on the situated learning theory. We've done a retrospective study to look at the impact, and found that many of the students that are now in industry are indeed taking on leadership roles. It has influenced students' educational aspiration. 79% have shown more interest in attending graduate school. Students that are in ARC are presenting papers or posters at 3 times the national rate. And there is 23% to 41% of female participation in the R groups around our 10 institutions. And there's materials. We have an REU in the box that talks about research experiences that NCWIT has published. The ARG is represented in that. We also have a handbook on how to do the model that is available through Amazon if you want to look at that. We also have a workshop that we're giving in a couple of weeks in Puerto Rico. If you have any interest, let me know. We have some funding. It's a 2-day workshop. But the materials on peer-led team learning and ARG is in the back. So I'll hand it over to our next speaker.
Great, thanks, Ann. I'm Ed Lazowska. I'm from Computer Science and Engineering at the University of Washington. And what I'm going to do is just try and mention a few things that we're doing that I think are working for us and you can do too. And I'm going to begin by talking about introductory courses. And to do that, I have to give you a bit of University of Washington context. Okay, so the way things work at the University of Washington is that students typically enter the university as pre-majors, and after taking a year of prerequisites, they apply for admission to majors. So that's a little unusual. It's important to understand. So some majors are open, meaning they take all comers, and some majors are competitive. And our majors, computer science and computer engineering, are sort of at the competitive extreme, meaning they're currently oversubscribed by about 4 to 1. All right? What this, and by the way, that capacity constraint is purely lack of investment by the university, right? It's not a decision on our part. It's just, you know, the way universities are run. There's something in the drinking water in provost offices around the nation that causes this to happen. All right, so this leads to the first topic, which is the importance of intro courses. And because we control our own enrollment in the major, the intro courses, CS1 and CS2, are purely attraction waters, right? They're university-wide service courses. We have about 2,700 enrollments a year, 2,700 a year in those 2 courses. And the goal is to entice as many of those as possible to be interested in computing, either for our major or for their major. Last year, we did a longitudinal study. We is Stuart Regis and Marty Stepp, who are in charge of these courses. And this meant looking at the students who took CS1 in the winter, took CS2 in the spring, applied to the major in the summer, and were admitted for this past fall. Make sense? All right? So among other things, what the survey asked of the students who were just enrolling in CS1, all right, was to rate their intention of becoming a computer science major on a 5-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, right? And then here's what we found among the new majors 3 quarters later. So those are the students who had filled out that survey, completed CS1, completed CS2, applied to the major, and been accepted to the major. What we found is that 52% of the new students in the major had either strongly disagreed or disagreed that they were going to become a computer science major, okay? And only 27% had agreed or strongly agreed, okay? So what this means is that high school students and freshmen have no clue about what's going to interest them, all right? And your intro courses are enormously important attraction waters for those students. And in my view, what it means is that even if you have multiple tracks of intro courses, all of them must lead to the major, right? You can have an intro course that's for non-majors, but it had better have a pathway into the major, or you're going to be leaving by the side of the road a whole bunch of students who had no intention of majoring in computer science, but get captured by the power of the field. All right, so I think that's a really important lesson, all right, which is that kids don't know what's going to excite them, and they get excited by a well-taught intro course, and you can't ghettoize students who don't believe they're going to be interested in being a computer science major at the outset, or you lose an enormous proportion of your major. So that seems really important. It doesn't, we happen not to have tracks. We have 1 intro course. You could have tracks, but you can't have tracks that are dead ends, or you're going to dead end a whole bunch of students who are going to be your majors, and many of those may be from underrepresented groups. Okay? So here's the other stuff that we do in our intro course. And again, all these are pretty obvious. We have entirely undergrad TAs, and 40% of them are women. Right? And that's not by our selection, it's by self-selection. That is the majority, a substantial proportion of the students who choose to become undergrad TAs are women. We have a women's seminar that is part of the course. It's, of course, optional. We have an honors section, which has a high proportion of women. There's targeted encouragement to high-performing women. Just, emails that say, hey, you're good at this. Have you thought of becoming a computer science major? We have a sort of body snatching regime in which students who do extremely well in the intro course are given a ticket into the major before they fulfill prerequisites. All right? So again, just sort of part of encouragement. We try to be really open to double majors and to students who find computer science late in their academic career, or even as post-baccalaureate students. So all of these are a set of things that I think advance all students, but advance women disproportionately. So here are some other things that go on. First of all, there's a fair amount of community building among existing students. And again, you're doing many of these things, but we have a mentorship program where we hook new students with existing students. We have an ACM chapter. We send between 15 and 20 students to Hopper every year. We send a smaller number to the Tapia conference. This is perhaps more interesting, and it's been, I think, pretty effective. We have a set of outreach activities. Here's a simple one. It's almost shameless. We ask all of our incoming students every year, and by the way, the University of Washington, like most universities in the country, draws the majority of its students from a small number of high schools. All right, 20% from about 24 high schools, because although we're a major national research university, we are the local university for students in the Puget Sound region. All right, so what we do is every year ask our incoming majors to nominate those high school teachers who were really inspirational, career-changing for them. Every great student has some of these, all right? And we invite those teachers and their spouses and the students who nominated them in for a dinner in the spring, all right? And we just brazenly brown them up, right? And, okay? Now, it won't surprise you that the students who take the trouble to nominate teachers are disproportionately women, right? So we are disproportionately browning up the teachers who've sent us great women. Right? And as a teacher yourself that nothing's more sort of empowering and rewarding to you than seeing someone who was your favorite student a couple of years ago, all right, now doing well in the next phase of their life, right? So, this costs us a couple $1,000s for a buffet and a tote bag every year for, 50 students from the local area, 50 teachers rather, and their spouses. And it's just a very powerful thing to do. It lets them know that we appreciate what they're doing. For, I think, 6 years now, we've participated in a program that was originated by UW, UCLA, and Carnegie Mellon, but now is much broader than that, called CS4HS. It's a summer institute for high school teachers. In our case, high school teachers of math and science, to teach them how to use computing in their disciplines, and again, honestly, to brainwash them into sending us more great students. Let's see, we have an outreach team that visits high schools. We have a YouTube video series, which many of you may have seen, that has a set of videos that attempt to dispel myths about computer science, to explain that people go into it for a variety of aspirational, change the world reasons, that they do lots of things with their computer science degree in addition to working in the software industry, and that working in the software industry is in fact interactive and collaborative and creative, right? So these are easily found off our homepage and have had really tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of viewings at this point. And some colleagues elsewhere actually did a statistical analysis that showed that these substantially change people's opinions of the field. Finally, as you heard from Maureen before, we're an NCWIT Pace Setter school. This is something that David Nodkin, sitting in the back, drove. And what that's done is to force us to state some goals and put programs into place to try to achieve those goals. So I think it's just really important to send the message, honestly, to your faculty colleagues that you're in this business, you're taking it seriously. Again, as a former department chair, and David was too, you realize that the message you send honestly does, in some subtle way, influence people's behavior, right? So if you want better teaching, you have the undergrads give a teaching award, and if you want better support of underrepresented people in your classes, then you try and reward the people who do that and send messages of that form. There are lots of things I haven't mentioned. For example, Larry Snyder, who's sitting in the back, has been an important soldier in Jan Cuny's army. As we heard a minute ago from Ann about Cuny, I thought she was talking about Jan Cuny instead of the City University of New York. But this effort to redefine the AP curriculum is very important. And again, that's going to be a powerful tool for us. Jan's program, you know, this trained 10,000 teachers by a frighteningly small number of years from now is extremely important, and it's something we can all get behind. That's it. Let me turn it over to Bobby.
Thanks, Ed. So as it says there, I'm Bobby Schnabel. I'm the Dean of the School of Informatics and Computing at Indiana University and also one of the co-founders of the National Center for Women in IT. And this is going to be short. Somehow every panel discussion sets out to say we're going to leave lots of time for discussion at the end. And there's some rule of life that says no matter what happens, it never works out that way. So
I was under time.
I'm not reflecting on any of my colleagues in these remarks. We started quite late. But in any case, so knowing that I was last, I also said that I was going to just make a few remarks, especially if I go in the right direction here. Well, let's try it that way. There we go. From the perspective of there's plenty of you in the room who are leaders of organizations, and probably almost all the rest of you in the room will be leaders of organizations at some point. So I'm just going to make a few reflections from both my perspective as dean right now and as a director of the institute that the National Center for Women in IT came from and is housed in at the University of Colorado, of a few things that leaders can do. And it's just those three. This is the only slide of the presentation. And the first one is something, and Ed kind of just said this, that a leader does, is articulate values of the organization. And what I'm going to do is make one anecdote for each of these three things from one of the two organizations. In the case of our school at Indiana University, we've consistently said since I've got there that the values of the organization are education, research, diversity, and economic development. And I think the point is that if you are consistently articulating diversity as a value of the organization, that's at least a starting point. It doesn't do the whole thing. And I'll give you one instance of where it didn't do the whole thing. Like a lot of schools, we put out some color glossy magazine for our alumni, in our case twice a year. And this one just came out a couple of months ago. The theme was supercomputing. And so we have a director of communications, a woman who understands our values very well, who gave me the final proofs. I don't micromanage this, but I look at the big picture thing. And there was a cover, and they thought supercomputing. Aha, Superman got in her mind. So the cover looked like this. The cover had a big male Superman figure there, and that was it. Okay, that's not the cover we published, by the way. And I said, nope, not going to happen. And immediately got, oh, but we're running late. We're always running late. So that's nothing new. And, oh, these are stock photos, and that was the stock photo that we had. And they tried that for a while, and I said, it's not going to happen. And so finally they kind of went grumbling back. It turned out that right next to the stock photo of Superman was the stock photo of Superman and Superwoman together. And so that's the one that came on the cover. Even that one's not perfect. It's been pointed out that Superman is bigger than Superwoman. And at some point you decide that you got 80% of what you were looking for, and you settle for that. So that's one. Strategy. Maureen talked quite a bit about strategy. And how there really is a strategy behind things. In the case of the Atlas Institute, from the start there was a strategy of emphasizing diversity. And so we had an undergraduate program, technology, arts, media minor, that by now has 500 to 600 students in it at that university, has always been over 50% female. And we really worked at sustaining that from the start. And then used that as a base to get into research and evaluation about the impact of various educational programs on women in computing. And it was from that base that the National Center for Women in Information Technology came. But I'll also admit, did we plan that? Absolutely not. There's got to be some element of luck and progression there. But if you've got a strategy that is emphasizing, in this case it was emphasizing gender in computing, you then also set the stage for doing things and sometimes the unintended consequences. And that gets me to the final thing, and anybody who leads an organization of any size realizes that trying to do it all yourself is absolutely pointless, and so a lot of things come down to hiring and empowering good people. I noticed that Lucy Sanders, there's Lucy, way in the back of the room. Okay, so this is a Lucy story. Lucy is the CEO of the National Center for Women in IT and had a 25-year career, very distinguished in Bell Labs through all its different forms. And was in 2001 a chief technology officer in a Denver part of Bell Labs, and Bell Labs had an early retirement program. So Lucy, who was on my board there, called me up and said, well, we've got this early retirement program, and I'm the last person they're trying to get to retire, and I know that was true, but I'd really like to change what I'm doing in my career if you can find a way to hire me in 3 weeks. And, well, you just answered the question. Universities don't do anything in 3 weeks, but we actually hired Lucy in 3 weeks, and shortly after that. And that involved going to some funders, some donors of the university to help us with the package. And so it involved a little bit of initiative, but it was certainly one of the best things you do. And then, of course, when you hire people of that quality, or Maureen for that matter, you get out of their way and let them do great things. So the final thing I'll just reflect on there is in some of the things that I've said there, not all, but some, an element of risk-taking. And ironically, for all of our research innovation, academics, when it comes to organizational things, are not necessarily the biggest risk-takers around. But I think I would encourage people, especially in this field, that sometimes the risk-taking is a useful and important thing as well. So at this point, Jane, I guess we turn it back to you.
Maureen alluded to a couple people who have stories to share, and at this point I'd like to ask them if they wanted to share. Who? Okay. Right here, can we get a mic to this gentleman right here? Okay, there's one.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to talk about what we've been trying to do at Florida State University. Is it on now? Yeah. Okay. Right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we've been trying to do at Florida State University. We started really an information technology program in the fall of 2005. So we're pretty new. But we started out with the goal of trying to make sure that we had a large number of women and minorities in that program. And so we designed the curriculum with that goal in mind. We designed the goals. We hired the faculty with that goal in mind. And one of the things that we did early on is we got involved in something called the STARS Alliance, which, like many of these other programs that people have talked about, is one of the broadening participation in computing programs from the National Science Foundation. And that is based on an idea of a student leadership corps, that is students who take responsibility for planning, conducting, and evaluating recruiting activities, as well as some things to bridge and retain students in the program. And so over the years, they have started with programs at elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, community colleges, and at Florida State to recruit women and minorities into computing. One of the things that they do is something called Move-In Day, where the first day that when all the students are coming into campus, they have a table set up under an umbrella, and they talk about cybersecurity. And they just, as students are bringing their computers on campus, they talk to them about what kinds of computer services they get, what they have to worry about, how to keep it secure, where to get help. Then they go on with tech support days, which they do every Wednesday on the Union, and their students out there sitting, talking to other students. And so we meet a lot of students in that way. We've gotten involved with the Technology Student Association for the state of Florida. And again, we meet there about 1,500 middle and high school students every year. And we actually, those students not only judge many of the projects, but they also run a leadership summit or a workshop for the students in the TSA. And then they've organized a bunch of things. We have game days where we open up the school, we put video game consoles on all the projectors and show them up on the big screens, and we play games together. And it turns out that Guitar Hero is very, very popular for both genders. We attract a lot of people with that. We do bowling nights. We do Sunday brunches, all sorts of things to get people interacting with each other. One of the other things we do is something called Wise Women, where it's women in IT sharing experiences. And so we get community women who are in charge, running IT companies, back in to talk to the women in our program. And so that helps build those connections. And so then finally, we've created a leadership course for the students who are a part of this student leadership corps. And it tends to be something on the order of 15 students in any given semester, and they pay for and get college credit, but learn about leadership, and as part of that, they help plan what they're going to do. And so that's what we've been doing. As far as our performance, what we ended up with is we have about 39% minority students at any one time in our program, and that's a mix of Hispanics, which is about 13%, and African Americans, which is about 26%. And then we have 22% women. Now that's about factor of 3 less than where we need to be, because the university average is 60%. So we've got a lot to do there.
Thank you. So we've now heard from 5 different places on the types of things that they do. Let's open it up for questions or discussions. Does somebody have a burning question they'd like to ask and have people respond to? You want to share something with us? We have about 10 minutes left, so we want to try to get in as many ideas as we can. So, is anybody? Okay, there.
Yeah, so I came in a little bit late, so maybe you already addressed this and I missed it. But what do you do with, what are your strategies for dealing with people who don't believe in diversity, who don't see a value in it? I think there's a lot of folks who don't, and don't sign on to these programs and have a number of reasons for why they do that. But I just wondered if you guys had any thoughts about how do you sell people on the idea to begin with?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I don't have a magic solution here, but I think there have been a number of clearly articulated arguments by people like Bill Wolf from the National Academy of Engineering years ago, who argue that engineering excellence results from diversity. That is, we are producing artifacts to be used by the full breadth of the population, and therefore the full breadth of the population has to be involved in creating those artifacts. So that message to me is really powerful, because I believe it. I may not believe that, for example, men and women or majorities and minorities use roads differently, but I can certainly believe they use user interfaces differently. All right? So I think there's a message there that's quite convincing. The second thing is that I think people often take a narrow view of quality. And what you have to message is that quality is multidimensional, and we tend to measure it in ways that are extremely narrow and traditional. And finally, I think you have to accept the notion that 15% of the people are never going to be on board. Mm-hmm. And that's life. And the other 85% have to be so passionately on board that those people don't matter or get marginalized. Okay? And, if you think back to when Jeff Bezos started Amazon.com, he realized that there were always going to be some number of people who were upset. And he had to make most of his customers so pleased, or let me say, he couldn't hire enough people to counterflame. All right, so he had to count on the population at large to counterflame, and that meant that most of his customers had to be so happy that they would carry the flag for him. And I think that's true for you as well. So, the one thing I learned as a department chair can never have any ideas of his or her own. All right, so your faculty colleagues have to have the ideas, and you have to make it easy for the people who have the good ideas, and get them to be your counterflamers.
Somebody else.
I was just going to add to that. You should also make it part of your core values as a leader. And so when you're hiring, that's something that you really want to look at. Is it part of the people you're bringing in? Is it part of their core value? And of course, you don't always know. I mean, there's always going to be that. But that's another thing that you want to consider.
And one thing I can add is if you're not a leader, but you're a person, don't do it alone. Find a colleague who's interested in this too, and champion it together. Use your passion, and the people in the middle, some of them will go with you. Some of them will come along with you, and some of them won't, but go grow it. Just don't feel like you have to do it alone.
Hi, I'm actually in civil and environmental engineering, and we have a huge problem getting our students trained to use computing in civil engineering applications. And most of you have been talking about training and exciting computer scientists. But what about the whole rest of the campus who need to be informed about informatics? And the computer science courses are in many cases turning them away, and the computer science professors aren't necessarily interested in gearing things towards non-majors. And it seems like a lot of the efforts to try and do something outside of computer science departments, at least on my own campus, have really struggled because everybody recognizes it's important, but nobody wants to spend time on it. So I was curious to know, are there successes out there for how to train people across campus to be computationally savvy?
So here's one example of success, and I'm going to divert this for a second, okay? One of the schools that's had a remarkable success with introductory courses in the past couple of years is Harvard, right? And they have more than 45% new majors are women this year. And it's entirely by a change in the introductory course, the person who teaches it and the way it's taught. Now, there's a second thing that's happened at Harvard, which is they introduced a course this past year in visualization for the sciences. And that course has an enrollment of 170, which is enormous by Harvard standards. All right, so it is scientific visualization for the campus as a whole. And I honestly think people are, let's see, my favorite analogy is years ago there was an article in IEEE Computer Magazine by Bob Luckey, who ran Bell Labs, and it was called The Last Electrical Engineer, okay? And the cartoon was an inverted pyramid, right? And underneath the inverted pyramid was one little cartoonish character holding it up, right? And the inverted pyramid was all of the applications, right? And the person holding it up was the last microprocessor designer, who was very well taken care of and very well compensated, but there was only one, right? And the message was either we embrace all of that stuff that utilizes what we do and we use that to inform what we do, or else eventually there'll only be one of us. And that's a message that I'm optimistic that computer scientists are beginning to hear. So one other thing that's happening now is many more universities are moving towards a sort of every ship on its own bottom funding model, right? Decreasing state budgets, for example, are causing that to happen at public universities. That means if you teach the students, you get the money. And if you don't teach the students, you don't get the money. And students are going to vote with their feet. And so if, honestly, computer science departments don't offer the courses that help students achieve what they need to achieve, then other programs are going to offer those courses. The market will let that happen. And there'll be only one person in the computer science department in the fullness of time. So I think this will play out very aggressively in the next 5 years, honestly.
Okay, we have, the next session starts in 2 minutes. And so I wanted first to thank our panelists for sharing their wisdom. And also to remind you that the resources are back behind in the back table back there, and please stop by and look at them. If there turns out to be one that you've run out, that it's run out, but you still want, let me know. We can get them to you, or we can put them on the website or something like that. So, but thank you for coming. And next year I want to report on what you have done to help retain and attract women to your programs.